Hello everyone, welcome back to Music Roundup. For this week I've chosen something different, which is to talk about a particular piece. So rather than pretending to write a music list for the Sunday that we're now not meeting on, I just thought I would talk about a piece of music that, for practical reasons, you'd be pretty unlikely to hear at St Saviour's Church. Not that anything's impossible. And it's a piece by Tallis, a great Renaissance composer from this country. And I mentioned him before when I was talking about William Byrd's music. Byrd and Tallis, these two composers, much loved by Queen Elizabeth I, and they were both recusant Catholics in Protestant England. And she allowed them both the permission to write music in Latin, even though it was embargoed and prohibited by the Protestant Church in this country, because she liked their music so much. And this is an excellent example of music of seriously high quality and craftsmanship. So the piece is Spem and Alium by Tallis. That's the title of it, which is taken from the first three words. And the sentence is, I have never put my hope in any other but in thee, God of Israel. Spem and Alium num quam habui praeteente Israel. That's the first part of the text, which is maybe 3 sentences long, taken from a Latin rite for Matins, one of the pieces of liturgy that was replaced by the Book of Common Prayer and the new Anglican liturgy. Now, the thing that makes this impractical as a piece to put down on a Sunday morning is that it's written for 40 voices. So it's Tallis' famous 40-part motet. And it's a staggering piece of music for many, many reasons. The sheer scale of it, of course, is an obvious reason why it's an impressive thing to have come up with. It's 10 minutes long, so that's however many, it's 168 bars, I think. So 168 bars times 40, that's a lot of writing to get through. Now, the reason for having 40 parts, this is all shrouded in a certain amount of mystery, this piece of music, because we only have various slightly vague sources and theories to go by. But there was an Italian composer called Strigio, who was known to have written a 40-part motet, perhaps 10 or so years before Tallis came up with his. And as the rumour spread to England, and Strigio himself actually visited at some stage as well, people started to challenge Tallis to match it. What Strigio had written was his motet Ecce Beatum Lucem, which is basically not as celebrated as Tallis' piece, for a simple reason. Strigio writes for 4 choirs, a 16-part choir, a 10-part choir, an 8-part choir, and a 6-part choir. And the purpose of his piece was that you would separate these various choirs in 4 different locations, so there's an element of geography to it. You'd have perhaps the large choir in front, and then 2nd and 3rd and 4th choirs up in galleries. It's a piece of spatial music, polychoral writing. And so in fact, quite a lot of the piece is made up from writing for an individual choir, so at most 16 parts. And then it will alternate a bit and share around, so it's almost as if he's writing one single motet but moving it around different locations in the building, so it creates 40 different individual parts to sing. Now, this is less impressive because it involves lots of rest, it involves less complicated musical writing, and the thing that makes it such a challenge is that there are just basic rules in the writing of music, rules that have been broken down now but were very much law in musical writing back then, about how individual parts could be in comparison with each other. So, if one part is to go, then another part can't do the same thing at exactly the same time. Can't do it an octave apart either, or 2 octaves apart, because that's unison, and if you're writing in harmony, then you don't have unison. Now, this rule is also applied to fifths, which is this. So moving around, if these parts are a fifth apart, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then moving around and remaining that interval apart is very much breaking the rules. But other parallels are allowed, so thirds, because they sound nice, they're encouraged, and sixths, that as well. So you create a harmonic language that stops unisons and stops fifths being parallel, but encourages thirds and sixths. Now, because of what's banned, not allowed the parallel fifths and unisons, that means when you're changing from one chord to the next, you've got to make sure that no part moves in the same direction at the same interval. And that's bad enough with 4-part writing. This is what students learn to do with music composition. They learn to avoid the banned parallels within 4 parts. And that's hard enough. So with 16 parts, that's tricky. With 40 parts, that is almost unthinkably difficult to do. There's so much checking involved, it's ridiculous. But Striggio was only writing for a maximum of 16. There are moments where it's very unison, and I think in fact he did disregard the rules about parallels and was not particularly careful because what's the point? So it's an impressive piece, but not mind-blowingly impressive. Anyway, Tallis took up the challenge, and he writes a 40-part motet, and I'm going to put a link to a video as well, a particular video that was made recently, and his contains no parallels at all. It's been checked. You can check it with a computer as well. None of the banned parallel fifths and octaves are included in Spem and Alium. Kind of miraculous. Now it begins with just one part coming in, and then another part follows with the same music, and this is a very common way to write Renaissance music. So just 2 humble parts at the beginning, then comes the next alto and the bass. So by about 30 seconds into the piece, you're already in 8, 9, 10 parts. It builds and builds and builds. And what's great in the video that I'm going to share is that it was done during lockdown. It's one of the many kind of gimmicky music videos that have been made by lots of people recording themselves in different places and stitching it together. But this is actually a particularly good one. It's really impressive. And what it does is it has each choir, on the left side, choir 1 working vertically down to choir 8. So Tallis uses 8 5-part choirs. Soprano, alto, tenor, baritone, bass. And you'll notice probably that there are a few people who sing in various different parts at the same time because it's all pre-recorded. So it comes in with members of choir 1, and some choir 2 singers come in, and it sort of shades apart. And when you get to about choir 5, choir 6, then 1 and 2 drop out. The first moment when all 40 parts sing together is bar 40, because this is a piece that's very involved with numerology. In fact, the total number of bars, 168, is equivalent to the added up number equivalents of the letters of Tallis, I believe, or maybe Thomas Tallis, one of the two. You've got to count it in a complicated way that doesn't include the letter J. Anyway, there's certainly an element of numerology linking to Tallis's name in this piece, which I might need to check. So there's a moment of 40 parts coming in. It's at 2 minutes 55 in this video, so look out for that. But what can you do then that is also interesting as a feature with 40 parts, apart from having them all sing at the same time? Well, there's another amazing moment at 4 minutes 50 seconds where all 40 parts are singing, and as you can see in the video, it does a very good thing of fading out anything that's not singing, so you can see when they are all singing together. At 4 minutes 50 seconds, all the parts have a rest, just for one beat. So there's a moment of sudden silence, and then they resume again. And that, when you're performing this piece, which I have done, is really nerve-wracking when you approach that point. Because people sometimes think that the words have a bit of a joke to them. Spem alium numquam habuit. I have no hope in any other person except in you, God. And if you think of the way that music was published in those days, you didn't have a full score of this sort of piece. Everyone would just have a book with their own part in, so you couldn't see the other parts. That's not how we operate these days. But it means, if you get lost, you've got no way of getting back into time. Therefore, your hope is only in God to get you back. That's the sort of idea that it might be just vaguely humorous. So, if anyone is the slightest bit out of time, that rest moment will be ruined. But of course, this is an extremely well sung, professionally done and edited video as well, so the rest is absolutely perfect in it. Then at 6 minutes 40 there's this big entry after another rest of all 40 parts singing in A major, and in G major having a big chord like that, when you've heard so much of the G major before, it's really exotic, it's colourful and expressive, and it's unusual for the time that this piece was written as well. And then towards the end there's a massive G major sound. The chords don't move very much because it's a bit like trying to steer an ocean liner with this number of parts. But they're all singing these cross rhythms. The way of avoiding having parallels moving around is just having all these interlocking, syncopated, complicated rhythms, funny leaps and things, and you'll hear that in the texture. It's what makes it so unusual, but it's also what makes it work. And in the end, the result Tallis got was from writing counterpoint and melodic lines in all these parts, rather than just big chords like Strigio. He created a piece that was just miles ahead in terms of the craftsmanship and skill of the Italian piece that had caused the challenge to write his own motet. So I hope you enjoy listening to it. I think it's a really staggering piece of music, and it's also a very, very good recording that's just been made. So enjoy that, and I'll see you again next week. Thanks.